Hey y'all, my name is TamRA Andress. I am your Fit and Faith podcast host. I'm pumped to be here. Just me, no words, no scripts, no intros, no outros. I love authenticity. I hope to breed vulnerability. And I usually do this alongside another dreamer, mover, shaker, entrepreneur, passionista is what I love to call them. If you're a dude, then a dude. But I am loving just coming together in community with other people to share their high and low stories, to share their journeys to comeback, because I believe ultimately that's where God would have us. He would have us on the mountaintop. And even though we learn a ton in the pit and in the valley, God would want us right now, especially in this season of life, in this time of our culture, to shine. And so here I am. I want to teach you how to shine. I want to be alongside you when you get your glow. I want to catapult you into your calling, whatever that is. So this isn't a fitness podcast. This is not a religious banter, though we preach Jesus all day long. And this is not just about nutrition or health or wealth, though I like some green, and I know you do too. It's not okay for us to not be okay with talking about all of these things in unison. You guys, we don't just need a mental health podcast. We don't just need a fitness podcast. We don't just need a religious, spiritual podcast. It needs to blend. This is what Fit and Faith is all about. It's all about creating alignment, connectivity. It's about pursuing your wholeness and claiming it over your life and over the lives of the loved ones that you have around you in your community. So thank you for tuning in. I would love to get to know you more. You can like, review, subscribe, whatever it is. Send me an email, DM me. It's me. I have an amazing team alongside me, but you guys are getting me for now. So enjoy. I'm so pumped to have a coffee conversation with you, is what I'd love to call them. Don't have my coffee right now, but I have it in my system, as you can see. All the love. Let's do this together and keep going for your dreams, y'all. We are live and in action. And I don't have our video tuned up that you know I love so much.
You should sing it for us.
Are you? No, I don't think that I should. I'm pretty understanding of my gifts.
Your giftings?
Yeah. And that is not one of them, but I do love a little jive to sister song. Oh man, we'll have to do an outtake.
Okay.
Cue it up. You guys, if you haven't been with us before, we are so pumped to have you. This is Tianna, I am Tamara, and we are here as two sisters just sharing the goodness of the Lord, sharing things that He's taught us, sharing journeys that we've been on, our testimonies, and ultimately just an opportunity for you guys to come in and have a real life conversation with two real women just living life out. I think today's conversation is going to be really good. We're both kind of in our emotions. And I think the concept of boundaries, which is today's topic, is something that has just been really pressed into me as I've learned to develop them over the last 4 years. And so sharing that, but also walking it out. And that is a consistent thing, because without the consistency we end up falling backwards and out of boundary, which is where we shouldn't be living. So welcome, thanks for being in the studio today.
I know,
it's so much more fun. It's so much more fun when you're here.
We did it.
I love you. Yeah, regardless of everything else going on. So let's chat, let's open up. I don't even know where to start with this can of worms.
But really,
it
really is. Okay, so I want to ask you.
Oh gosh.
You said as you developed over the past few years.
Yeah.
Have you read the book?
No. Is it just a flat out book, Boundaries?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, what am I
First of all,
missing?
everyone needs to read this book.
What is it?
I'm gonna look up who it is. I know one of the names is Townsend. But
okay, is it not the Henry
Cloud?
It is Henry
Townsend.
Cloud.
Yes.
Okay, so I have been referenced to this book. Clearly, I need to actually listen to it. So I'm an Audible listener.
Yeah.
I love Audible.
Yeah.
And I have it in my wish list. Every time I listen to the intro, it's just not a good Audible.
Oh really?
Not for me, it wasn't.
Okay.
Did you listen audibly?
I did not. I read it because
Okay.
I took so many notes.
Oh, I'm sure.
But maybe skip like the first section because I know there are some books like it took me a while to get into it too, and then I was like,
oh, so good. It's not
like,
the content. It wasn't the content. It was the voice.
Oh.
And I'm super weird about voices.
That's
if I'm
fair.
like I can't listen, so maybe I just need to actually pick up the book because I do love to read.
It's life changing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm excited. I know I've been taught everything from it. From
my
life coach.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful for her, but she does. She always tells me that. And then Safe People is the other one. Have you heard?
I've heard about it. I started reading it and I stopped. I was like, this is too much.
It's a little traumatizing.
Yeah.
It is because we're around people all the time. And so understanding that boundary and overlap of the people that we choose to have in our sphere of influence is can be scary because people have all of their things that they bring to the table. And at the very same time, you are able to create a boundary to say no to those things. And I think that's where I had the hardest time because I won't say was, I am still recovering through this, but a people pleaser. And I love people to be happy. And I feel like that's something God calls us to do, but he doesn't call us to make them happy. Mm-hmm. He calls us to love them well. Mm-hmm. Sometimes loving people further away is a really healthy boundary. Oh gosh, I struck a chord.
This is good. I feel like we're going to continually come back to that one.
Oh, are you good?
Because I feel like that is one thing that we all struggle with, right? Is like, particularly as believers, like we need to love people, we need to love them well, and sometimes that does not mean, like sometimes that doesn't even mean being in their life.
No.
Like a lot of times that means just praying for them. Yeah. And so like
Good, it's good.
Okay, so let's start where you started. Safeguards, protections. And obviously why it's important for us to have those safeguards. Let's start there.
Okay. So I think the biggest thing that I've learned in the seasons that I have is knowing that just like you would safeguard your time, and that's a huge boundary thing that I've had to cultivate myself. You see your life, you have your day-to-day experiences, you have the hats that you wear, whatever title that may or may not be, motherhood, being a wife, being a coworker, being a sister, all of these different things. And if you live your life in a space of autopilot without full recognition of what you're doing, when you're doing it, and why you're doing it, you end up completely inhibiting yourself in your actual capacity, and ultimately you live a boundary-less life because you're trying to be all the things and do all the things, which I hashtag all the things a lot, and but yet I do it knowing that the choice that I'm making in those things are very intentional.
Right.
Now.
Right.
Where before living that boundary-less life, it was an intention-less life. And I was living ultimately to be happy and not to be whole. And it catapulted me into a really bad place.
Right.
And so that's why it speaks so deeply to me, is that I know the huge value add since being introduced to this concept of boundaries. And it sounds not fun. It actually doesn't. It sounds like restrictive, and it sounds like a rule, and it sounds like I can just see Moses now with his like tablet, right, of like coming down from the mount and like being like, here are the 10 commandments, and so often like people think that is Christianity, right?
Right.
And like, here's a set of rules, and if you don't live by them, you're not getting into heaven. But God actually like loves us to have and experience freedom, and boundaries are actually the opposite. The way to receive and understand freedom is through boundaries. That's a lot. That's a lot of information.
So, okay. So much that you said I want to touch on.
Okay.
But the last point, I love that you just said, because in the world, boundaries and rules are restrictive. But I've just been recently, in the past 6 months, leaning in to the holy and amazing and beautiful concept that the Lord gave us those boundaries so that we could truly be free.
So good.
Because like I was reading a book and it was talking about how like we love our, like, us people pleasers, we love our roles. Like, give us a list of things to do, and we will do them.
Yeah, that's true.
But, like, God gave us, like, He gave us the 10 Commandments so that we could live the best life in Him. Because, like, if we're not gossiping, there's no drama.
Yes.
If we're not sleeping around, there's no repercussions of the drama. Again, it just comes back to trauma.
So good.
And we see that so often as restrictive, as, oh, well, I'm not being able to live my best life. But honestly, getting rid of the drama by not lying, cheating, stealing, whatever, murdering,
mention that,
like, allows us to truly live free, whole lives and not broken lives because we're engaging in those activities. And the same thing goes with boundaries. Like, it might feel restrictive, but having a boundary between this friend that is toxic is allowing me to have my peace so that I can actually serve them in a fruitful way and not just
it's really
the
good.
leftovers.
Right, absolutely. Or out of the negative emotion of your spirit versus the spirit man that is being built up through the Lord, because you are responding in anger, or you are responding in hostility, or through gossip because you're pulling that anger into somebody else. And so there's absolutely so much, and I think we've kind of circled to this concept of boundaries within relationships kind of first, which I think is really important because we are relational beings and God intends for us to be in communion with other people. It is the people that He intends for us to be in communion with that matter the most, but in a way that is really healthy. And if we are choosing to be in communion with everyone because we're people pleasers, we're limiting even the depth of the relationships that are meant to be within that inner circle. And I know that. I can speak right to that.
I can see that in you.
I
really
know
can.
it. I know it. And it's bad. It's something that, like, I had to recognize within my marriage, that he was getting my leftovers.
Yeah.
Like, and this is something I constantly have to check myself in, because I do love people and I do want, like, to share with people and be present with people and help people and sharing the knowledge that we've actually cultivated these concepts as a married couple. And so when I'm giving them to somebody else as a resource, I feel like, oh, I'm doing my due diligence for the Lord, right? Like, this is something He would have me do, and utilizing that frame of mind when I could just be at home, relishing in the fact that we've cultivated these safe boundaries and now we are in better relation together. So that's something I'm constantly focusing on. So realizing that imperfectly we are walking this thing out, and that's why we're here with you. We want you to realize, like, the real raw components of these deep conversations. And last time was playful and fun, and how do you get more play into your life? And so we're also lively, like, want to hang out with you kind of girlfriends, but at the same time, like, the reason that I feel so committed to these conversations, like, publicly, for people to actually get a hearing in on something that we would, talk about, is that there's so much wealth. There's so much wealth to these hard conversations. And so cultivating them relationally, like, what's a way that you have done that, either within your marriage, or obviously we can talk about motherhood, but I think that's a whole nother topic of boundaries.
I'm noticing a trend. We cannot steer into motherhood in our conversation.
We cannot. It's so true.
It's so deep.
Yeah.
Repeat the question.
So, for boundaries in relationships, what are some ways that you've helped you've cultivated them, whether it be within friendships or your marriage, and you can talk about your kids too.
So, there are so many different planes of that. On the far plane, one really hard way I've had to do that is to truly just not speak to certain people.
Yeah.
There are, honestly, I'm estranged from my father. I don't talk to him. He messages me every few months, negatively. It's not great. And I just continue to pray for him. And every time I just continue to pray for him, and I just know that it's not quite time yet. The Lord keeps saying, like, we're not there. It's not time. He's not ready. And that is a really hard boundary, like, to know that you're not speaking to your parent. Like, that's really hard, but it's where we are. And, like, the biggest thing is, like, we can't change people.
No, definitely not.
We cannot. And there is no fruit in having, like, just repeatedly negative, like, interactions. And then on the opposite end of that, boundaries is just, it's as simple as, like, within a marriage, knowing your strengths and weaknesses.
That's good. And
cultivating that within each other. Like, a boundary for my family is that I do not put my kids to bed. That is not.
That's good.
Like, that's not
You're
good.
Yeah.
I'm on edge. I am not a kind person, but my husband is so patient in that, and he knows that and takes that on.
That's really cool. It's a great example. I know it is. I know it's probably hard, especially when he's not there or something. But okay, so I want to kind of go back because one, I think it's a heavy topic that a lot of people are dealing with. I've personally dealt with the same thing in relationships with my parents, in relationships with my siblings, where I had to, kind of cut conversation, cut those open lines of communication. And I think that happens more often than not, and it's not a conversation that people are comfortable talking about because it feels out of nature to what the kingdom is about and calls us to, and family, and of course brothers and sisters. Shoot, this is called sister. And like, even when we named it, like, I have a sister that, like, God gave me, like, by blood, and we have never really seen eye to eye. We've always had just, like, difficulty in experiencing sisterhood, and so it's been so amazing to have, like, these women come into my life where it's like just goes so deep without judgment, without that animosity, and also realizing that open lines of communication are available within different relationships. So walking that out and knowing that it's okay, that God has a bigger plan for our family than I can even comprehend. So us trusting as daughters or trusting as sisters or whatever that role may be, that our issue with control and our desire to fix and mend and tweak relationships based on what we imagine they should be is out of alignment with what God would have us do. And I'm just throwing out all my cards here, people. I'm a people pleaser. I'm a control freak. I'm like, what's wrong with me? It's therapy, okay? I'm working on it. But I think I naturally have this tendency that I want to, like, fix and control things to be a certain way. And that, yet I was living a boundary-less life. So imagine a healthy boundary. So I had a lot of unhealthy boundaries, but imagine the destruction that I was literally single-handedly cultivating because I was trying to build a life that I had seen other people mirror or image, or asking of me from an achievement standpoint, or people will take. People without boundaries constantly want from you. And in all the wrong ways. They will strictly utilize you for your gifts. They will strictly utilize you because of the monetary supplement you're providing their company. They don't care if you have to stay late and somebody else has to unknowingly pick up your children from their school, or they're sick and you can't go into work. Like, these are things that you can recognize within your companies from a business perspective of, is my company good at setting boundaries? And honestly, people who don't have boundaries don't like people who have boundaries. And I think that's in the boundary book. Because,
we come under attack for that.
A lot.
Like, why are you not... I have a client right now that's dealing with that.
Yeah.
She's in a manipulative relationship. I'm having her read the book.
Good.
And she's like, she sent me a text and she was like, I did not know that this was me. And I'm like, yeah, that book is hardcore. But it's just like, those people can't understand. They're like, what? Like, what is this thing?
What do you mean I can't call you whenever I feel like it? What do you mean you're not going to answer the phone?
And I think that is one of the biggest things we have to recognize about this boundary relational struggle is that their hang-ups are not ours.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that they don't have boundaries doesn't mean that we shouldn't.
Yeah.
The fact that they can't understand it or respect what we put in line, that's not our issue. That's their issue. And that's like one of the big things that comes up in the book is like, we can't take on responsibility for other people's actions or their feelings. We're not making them feel this way. They're having reactions based on boundaries we've set up, and as long as that is honoring the Lord and respecting like who we are and what God has called us to, that's all we're supposed to do.
That's so good. What is really beautiful about this, and I wanted to share this point too, and in hopes and kind of proclamation over your relationship with your father too, is that there comes a point that people do have an opportunity to choose to understand. And whether that's them learning through, not through you, because that's not our responsibility either, is to teach them about boundaries. So don't gain boundaries and then say, I'm going to teach you about boundaries if they don't like boundaries. It's not going to turn out well for you. Let that be something that God lays on your home and your spirit and your heart, but it is not intended, as I share all of this with you, I'm not doing it from like you should do this. Yeah. I'm doing it from a place of wanting your wholeness for you, and just sharing how it is that I have to walk through this consistently. I think Tianna has the same shared heart in that, but what my hope is that, and knowledge is that as people learn to understand why the boundaries are helpful for them personally, they start to create their own. Mm-hmm. When that happens, this new relationship is capable of emerging. And I've seen that in my relationships with my parents. I've seen that in my relationship with my siblings. And it's transforming. We're still in the process of receiving what that looks like and trying to navigate this newness in our relationships. But ultimately, I can sense God has released like it's not, no waiting anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, let's start making small progresses forward. And it becomes very different than the relationship you previously had, but it becomes one that you can start to recreate the foundations of trust, which ultimately boundaries equal trust, if you think about it. So in your relationship and maritally, we can share this, and even in motherhood, because I think it's a really important conversation, we'll circle back to it, is that as you cultivate boundaries within yourself, people trust that this is the consistency that Tianna's going to bring to the table. I can trust that she's going to show up for me. I can trust that when I share something hard, she isn't going to just completely ignore my conversation, but instead she's going to ask me questions, and she's going to come to the table open-hearted and empathetic and come back with something that the Lord would have her say versus just what her gut is saying. Mm-hmm. I can trust you for a good time. I can trust you for a warm conversation. And these are not because this is your personality, though that is a part of it. It's because you've cultivated boundaries of how you share yourself with the world. And so boundaries within, our marriage would be the same thing. Like, you and your husband can rely on each other's strengths and weaknesses, knowing those things and having open conversation about them to say, okay, I can trust that my husband knows me well enough to know that I don't not love my children. I want to give them a good night kiss. I've just been with them all day, and my best time with them is in the morning.
I'm a morning person.
Right?
I really am.
So I think that there's so much beauty and there's so much depth in this conversation, and we could take it in so many different ways, but let's kind of jump into that conversation of motherhood. Like, where have you learned to establish boundaries as a mom?
So the huge one recently has been I have started working from my studio. I can't work from home.
Yeah.
Because entrepreneur life.
Yes.
There's always something.
Yeah.
And I am not my best person. I'm not, it's not, first of all, it's not fair to them.
Yeah.
To get part of me. And it's been really, really hard because I'm like, I just want to go home. I don't want to sit here by myself. But having that boundary of your computer will not come home. You're going to work at the studio. You're going to finish your work so that when you go home, you're just home. Like that's
awesome.
It's been so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's been really great.
And that's a really good one. I think that's a really hard one.
Oh.
And especially if people don't have that, like this is like their home office is where they do their work. But my husband is really good at teaching me this because he has to do the same thing in his job, is that being present when you're with them and your boundary being like off your phone, off your devices, right?
Phone.
This is just this is a boundary. If you can learn to manage your phone versus your phone managing you,
yes,
you will break chains on so many levels. That's not the first thing that you look at in the morning. That's not what controls your attention. If it dings or your phone, like the iMessage thing, I cannot tell you. I had one, so I understand, loved it. It was the most distracting thing, always buzzing on your wrist. And where does my eyes go when something lights up below me when we're having a conversation?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be rude.
Yeah.
But it gets all of your attention. And it's killing our brains. It's so bad. Constant overload.
I started watching my screen time.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good thing to check in on.
An hour above apparently the rest of the world. I'm like, okay.
Really? I wouldn't imagine that. I wouldn't think that, but I guess your phone is smart.
Right, I do my Devo in my phone.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a part of it.
That's an hour. Let me stop. Okay.
That's if you are boundarying your time within your devotional versus jumping off and checking like Facebook or Instagram, then totally, or your email. But yeah, so I think other things like, what about other conversations or things within your family that you've created boundaries with, like the children maybe?
It's a hard one. It's interesting because that's a hard one, particularly for mothers, I think.
Yeah.
Because there are so many women. My husband and I were married for a long time before we had kids, so we don't really have this problem. But a lot of my clients struggle with putting their kids before their husband. And ladies, this is really hard, but the Bible tells us we're supposed to.
So good.
Our husband is right after Jesus. And don't take this to mean like, if you have a toddler, yes, they depend on you for survival.
Right.
Don't let your baby starve.
Yeah.
But it's just like creating boundaries. Like, so for us, this doesn't always happen, but we have to make sure our kids are in bed at a certain time so that we have an hour to just talk and decompress together, because that's important.
It's really good.
Our kids, I think they're so seamless now.
I know. And honestly, some people don't even probably realize that some of the things they've already instated are a boundary.
Yeah.
One of my girlfriends who's been on the podcast in the past, Morgan Hart, who is also a pastor of mine, she and her husband, they have a hard boundary that you don't enter their bedroom unless you've asked or not.
Ooh.
And I was always like, that's kind of strange. Like I like immediately judged her when I heard that, which is horrible. But she also has older children, so they're not toddlers, which I was in toddler phase when she told me that. So I was like, oh, that's not gonna work. Not gonna work. But her kiddos are in like, upper elementary school and now in middle school, and I think like I still get changed in front of my kids. Well, when they're in third grade, my son is not hanging out when I'm taking a shower.
Right.
So I totally get it, and I really respect the concept of it, that this is our space.
I'm going to steal that one.
Right?
That's a good one.
It's a really good one, and it's needed, especially as they get older.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a huge deal as when they're small, but like literally our family probably spends the most time together in our bathroom. in the entire
bathroom.
House. Yes, isn't that so weird?
Okay.
It's like toothbrush time, it's bath time, it's shower time, it's brush our hair, it's whatever conversation. I do have a big bathroom. I do have a big bathroom, and I know that's really strange. And it wasn't always our bathroom; it used to be the kitchen. And sometimes we still spend time in the kitchen.
Okay. I was like, wait, you had your bathroom in your
Okay. I love you. She's not blonde. Well, sort of. That's awesome. But yeah, so I don't know. We just always spend time there. So I can't imagine that being a rule for me, but I really loved it when I heard it for her. And as they get older, I really do think it'll become more of a safe haven for me and my husband. Yeah. So interesting. Just wanted to share.
Cool.
I think other boundaries that I've instilled with my kids, and these are boundaries. I mean, I guess it depends on how you look at it, but around food or their health or the screen time could be a boundary, right? That's a huge one. Mm-hmm. The way that we speak to each other, the words that we use.
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
I think that there's so much power in our words. And I even wrote this when we were talking about it, or when I was doing my devotional this morning, is the boundary around your mouth and what comes out of it. And if we are able to be mindful of what we're saying, more so than just letting life speak, we become much more better listeners, and listening has such power. Mm-hmm. So I think that would be a boundary that I think I can work on. I think a lot of people can work on.
I love that. I love it so much because even if you don't think you have boundaries, you have boundaries.
Yeah, true.
You do. It's just whether or not there are boundaries where there needs to be boundaries.
True.
Because I think that all of us can always use more.
Absolutely. I mean, I really agree, which is, again, it's not about sorry guys, I'm looking at my notes because there was such good things that came out of my quiet time this morning, but it's not about it being this hard, fast rule that can never shift and change. Right. Boundaries are also something that may ebb and flow as seasons adjust. And so recognizing of the fact that this is your cultivation, right? You and God, you got this thing. You guys make the plan. Our ideas are just simply ideas, and it's how we're choosing to live and move forward. But I think that there are probably a few of the hard, fast rules, like you said, the 10 Commandments of how we're expected to live our lives, how there should be boundaries within our marriage, and where we're spending our time and our energy investment with them. It's not stepping out. It's not the grass is greener. It's the explanation of the marriage bed. And we had a really good conversation at church recently about sex in marriage and the boundary of obviously the fact that belongs in your marriage, and doing it prior to what happens when you're bringing other people into that experience. And so I'm really mindful of how I'm going to teach my children the boundaries around their sexuality. I'm married, we're married, we're together, but we've had experiences prior to, and it literally has been such turmoil in our relationship. And so wanting none of that for my children, and really having to cultivate conversations even as early as they are now about what that looks like. It's really hard.
And particularly on that subject, it's really hard because it's, again, one of those things of the world where it's it's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. It's fine. Mm-hmm. I mean, whatever. Yeah. Until you are in the relationship that is supposed to be sanctifying and is supposed to, just allow you to be all of who God created you to be. Mm-hmm. That you see the repercussions of having not honored that. Yeah. And it's just,
it's really hard. It's a really hard one. And it's something that I'm just constantly conscious of. I'm in the process of helping and want to share this with you anyway. So I'm asking you now, live in front of everyone.
Oh.
So if she says no, then you know she said why. No pressure. No, so I'm in the process of helping cultivate a girls conference.
I saw that.
Right? So I want you to come. You have got to share all of your confidence, soul work, like all of that with these girls. So I'm asking you now to come and be a speaker, which is going to be so fun because you'll be amazing at it. But I am so passionate about this age spectrum of 6th grade to 12th grade.
Yes.
And the starving society that's been cultivated in their self-worth and self-identity and self-love and understanding who they are as children, as daughters of the Most High King, and really respecting their bodies. We have the examples of like what's being shown on TV and what's being shown on, national experiences that everybody's watching, like the Super Bowl. And so within that, how do you cultivate, boundaries for your children where they don't think, oh, it's no big deal?
Yeah.
Because if you're walking around with barely any clothes on and your little Daisy Dukes and now the midriff and now, all of this, or the bralette showing and all of that, I get it, it's fashion, I own it myself sometimes, but I'm also a woman in a covenant marriage.
Yeah.
And I am not choosing to flaunt my body, I'm choosing to experience fashion. So I think that there's a variability that I have to be cognizant of when I walk out of the door. But I can't let my 13-year-old. They don't understand that yet.
You just had a 13-year-old.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
Wait, really? No, I don't. She's only 5.
Of course, because I just saw that beautiful picture of her, and I'm like, no, she's not 13.
Not 13. She's a baby.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine.
Yeah.
Gary and I always have these fictitious conversations of when they are here,
right?
What are we gonna do? And we don't even know what the world's gonna look like in 8 years from now.
Yeah.
Which is scary in and of itself, or maybe amazing. I don't know.
So this is a really weird segue, but I feel like it just goes there. I think that kind of leads us to one of the biggest issues we have is boundaries within ourselves. Yeah. As women.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not just about modesty sexuality or any of that stuff, but just boundaries as women. And I'm not saying that boundaries aren't important for men, because they are.
Oh, yeah.
They're important for everybody.
Yeah.
But as women, I think we have to be extra vigilant about it, having our own boundaries within ourselves. You and I, we were talking before we started. We were both, there's lots of feelings happening in lots of different areas. And one of the boundaries I struggle with is that I don't think the word is pride, self-focus. And not I am important, I need to take care of myself, but letting the boundary of, letting our minds run wild. And that comes into play with our self-worth. Letting our minds, I was speaking with a friend yesterday who, she just started a new business. And, she following everyone else and seeing their perceived success and stuff, her mind started running wild, and she had to set the boundary of, I just need to get off Instagram. And I was like, yeah, you do.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
So boundaries within ourselves, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you are, the impression that's being laid out into the world. No matter if it's in your home, with your children, with your spouse, with all of these people that I know we're passionate to help, right? But the imprint of the kingdom, you're the imprint of Jesus, and likely the only option or the only opportunity of light that some people are going to come in to interact with on a given basis. I might be the only person that Chick-fil-A person, even though they look to work at Chick-fil-A and they say, my pleasure, they might not truly know the experience of God. And so for us to be really mindful of the boundaries that we're setting on, our personal self capacities, that I shouldn't, if I have not had a time to if overflow, and if I haven't had time with the Lord, if I haven't had quiet time, if I have not been by myself at some point during the day, by the end of the day, I'm not the best version of myself. And who gets that? My kids, my husband. That's really sad, right?
And so, or the person at Chick-fil-A, because I'm in a rush and I'm like, kids, hold on, I'm trying to blah, 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 whatever's going out of my mouth, whatever's coming out of my like energy that's now being shared with people is wasted opportunity if I'm not to my fullest potential. And so for me, that huge part would be a time of self-care, quality time with myself, quality time with Jesus when I'm having time alone. That's, again, your kind of concept of soul work. You really can't do soul work other than deep conversations like this, which don't happen every day, all day, unfortunately.
That would be tiring.
But you can't do that. You can't do that with other people, generally.
And I just want to say, self-care is not always getting your nails done, ladies.
True.
Just throwing that out there.
That's so true.
While I think that's very important, in a season and in a time to make time, like just to take care of your body.
Sure, absolutely.
Go get a massage, like that can be very life-giving.
Absolutely.
Honestly. But we are talking about prayer. Recognizing your feelings, because I love to do that one. I love to be like, nothing's happening. It's fine. And then it just explodes and I'm crying and I'm on the floor.
Yeah, so true.
Like having that boundary of like assessing and, listening to what God is saying and what is happening, because I don't know about you, but I like to pretend.
Yeah, well, it becomes easier because, again, you become on autopilot at that point.
Yep.
But then you're living out of expectation. What is the next step I should do? Like, because you're expected to do it, and that's what the next day is, part of the day is
just
asking
go do
of
it.
you.
Yeah.
Versus setting a boundary and saying, no, this is what I'm choosing to do, and this would be a time boundary. So, like, my time is not everybody's.
Yeah.
This is my locked-in time, and my self-care time comes within my day. So for me, like that time for me is before the sun rises, when my kids are still sleeping. I choose that time for myself, and I go to the gym during that time. I have my quiet time during that time. Sometimes I'm doing business development stuff during that hour. I'm having coffee pot by myself. These are things that fill me up so that I get to flow out by the end of the day, all day. I can constantly go back and reset myself into that space.
I actually really love that. Guys, this morning TamRA messaged me before 7 a.m. and I was like, oh good! We're up at the same time doing the same thing.
I love it. It's so good. When girlfriends send me messages that early, I'm always like, ooh, yay, what's good right now? Because I just am like, I am full capacity at that hour.
Yeah.
I'm like, let's go. I hit the ground running. If I had a girlfriend that was like next door, we would be like, let's hang out, let's have coffee. We will have our best conversations. I live my best life at 5 a.m.
But seriously, and it's so funny because I would listen to devotionals of women that were like, it's fine, you can do your devotional at night, and I'm like, your day's over.
Yeah.
And while I understand different seasons call for different things and give you different opportunities, and I understand that if you have a newborn, it can be really hard to be like, sure, I'm gonna get to 5 a.m.
So true.
I get that, but at the same time, like, there is no better way to start your day than with Jesus. Like, there's just not. Because, like, if I do not start my day with Jesus, my kids walk in my room and I'm like, what do you want? I am not nice.
You're like, what's happening? But I was going to circle back to that because I think that when you were talking about your going to work and making sure that that's a boundary for you, like, we're so, when our energy is being pulled in one direction and then there's not a clear boundary on what we're expected during that time, and somebody else tries to come into that energy space to pull from you, even your own children who mean no harm, obviously, maybe sometimes, but likely not, like, you end up providing them like this backlash, and I'm so guilty of it, and Gary's like, they didn't, and they are not trying to mess up your jive, whatever you got going on, they just need you for a moment. So it's so true for us to be really cognizant of what it is that we're doing when we're doing it. And if you do choose to work from home, because there's a lot of stay-at-home moms that work at home moms, if you will, you being mindful of the energy that you're providing your children when you're trying to quote-unquote work.
Yeah.
Because you could really mess up and miss the boat. I do it, so that's why I can
honestly, I mean, my daughter's turning 6 this month, and I've been doing it since before she was born. And it wasn't until this year that I was like, this is not good.
Yeah.
as well intentioned as we've mean it, and as well as she's even taken it.
Of course, they're so
she's
resilient.
taking it so well,
Yeah.
but like it's just not the kind of mom that I want to be. It's not the kind of woman I want to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like you said, you just don't even realize it.
Yeah. And I think that's where, again, the world allows us to do it in such a way that's so mindless, even through marketing. Like, you're constantly being marketed at. And so where's your boundary on your inputs? And that was something that I was thinking, like, where's your boundary that you cultivate with your phone, with your social media, with your TV, with your music? Like, those are inputs happening all the time. And so I have really hard boundaries on my inputs of music within my car when my children are in there specifically, but always, because that's when my mind races.
Yeah.
I will literally go into this magical land of whatever's on the radio.
Right.
And I'm like, what just happened? Like, I need strict boundaries, and even if it's Caleb and I listen to the thousandth time of this specific song, I'm like, oh, I'm tired of this song.
I know.
I have to revert my energy and remind myself of the importance of hearing those words versus mindless banter that could be happening on other radio stations. So that's a really good, simple thing that people can choose, the inputs of what's going into their brain on a regular basis.
You're so right. I actually, on that, like, music is a big one.
Yeah.
I also just recently gave up TV for like the 1,000th time because I'm like, after sitting and watching something like, what's an example of just like even The Bachelor?
Oh, good. I'm so glad you used that example.
With all of the cattiness and, you know, like TV is like, let's just be real, it's all about sex and sexual appeal, and I'm just like, I'm so stressed out right now. I think it can be like relaxing. Like I just rewatch The Office all the time because I'm like, it's just stupid. And it's just like, it's clean.
Yeah, it is.
But I'll just be like, there's so much drama, and like the hard part, like that is what the world is.
Yeah. Which you circled, like that circles back to what you said at the very beginning. Like, all of these boundaries are to eliminate drama.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like, on all fronts, what you hear, what you see, what you say, what you don't say, like all of that in your relationships, it's all to eliminate drama so that you can live a free life.
Mm-hmm.
So you can live a no drama zone life. And it seems not possible when you're so submerged in it.
Yeah. And
you feel like you're just treading water through drama 24/7. But I can tell you, because I live on the other side, I've lived on the other side, that it is possible, and it is so amazing.
Oh, yes.
It is so amazing. And it's not to say it never seeps in, because Lord knows we live in the world, of the world.
Yeah.
But when I stopped watching The Bachelor, The Bachelorette was a perfect example. It was on the tip of my tongue because I saw somebody that, I guess he came to Virginia Beach. And
is that what that was about?
Last night, yeah, the episode came to Virginia Beach.
I was like, why is everybody talking about this?
Right. It was on my social media, and one of the girls who was a burn sister was there, and so I saw it on her thing, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I looked at the comments, and the comments were like, this is garbage, this is trash, he actually gave her a rose, can you believe all the girls in Virginia Beach and how they were acting? And like, I didn't watch it, so I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
But I also didn't watch the Super Bowl, and I still have heard about it. So I'm learning without needing to watch the stuff, but I was an avid Bachelorette fan. Like, I mean, every single season, every single episode. My husband actually would spend time with me in order to watch the show, so he also became a Bachelor Nation fan. We would like, who's gonna go on? Let's do the votes, all that. Like, really, really bad, really catty, but I loved it. And in hindsight, I remember after a year of giving up TV, giving up movies, giving up secular music, it had been a year, I was like, let's just sit and watch The Bachelor for old time's sake.
Stop.
I'm serious. So we like poured a
How
glass of
long
wine
did you last?
We turned it off within minutes.
Yep.
And we both looked at each other, and I was like, this is the garbage that I've been fueling myself with. Which seems, and I get this. So many people say that they mindlessly zone out to TV, but you're not mindlessly doing anything.
Oh no, it's back there.
You are not mindlessly doing anything. I don't care what you're doing. Again, even music, even hanging out at the beach, like all these things, none of them are mindless. And so being incredibly mindful of what mindless crap you're putting into your head
Oh my gosh.
and your spirit. So it affected me, and I know that sounds crazy. Like, you're gonna blame this choice or this like cultivation of yourself off of a reality show? Yep. Because it was a deposit into me, just like it would be a deposit into our children if we were allowing them to watch what is now the Disney Channel 24/7, and what that is cultivating in their minds, because it's not Christian households. It's not the language that they're using towards each other, the clothes that they're, all of these things mindlessly are really intentionally making our society like this. Which is really scary. That's a lot of information. I know, every time we do this, like, we're like a little bit in shock afterwards. Like, it's a little bit,
I don't know why it still surprises me though.
Like, when they lay it all out on the table in such a different way than like having just a quick added part to your conversation.
Yeah.
So yeah, doing this every day would be hard.
Oh my gosh.
It would be really hard. So I wanted to go circle back to, and I want you to kind of go there. Where beyond what we talked about in our spiritual lives are examples biblically that Jesus himself created and cultivated boundaries.
Oh,
right?
I love it.
This is really good, and this is why we know the importance of it. And it's not just from the Ten Commandments. So what do you got? You can use any of these examples.
This is the first one that came to mind, and it's for you, Tamara.
Oh gosh, what is it?
Jesus, many times, had the crowds pushing in on him, and he just left. And I read this in a book a while ago, but it was like, we are not for everyone. And that is so hard, like, as a believer to grasp and to really be like, no, I need to give to everyone. No, Jesus didn't do that. The crowds would be pushing in and he would leave, or they would be headed somewhere and they would go somewhere else.
And the disciples would be like, where are you going? All of those people want you to come speak to them. Where are you going? And he's like, they'll be there. Or I need to go.
God said go.
Yeah. Or we're passing through. We're just passing through. That's a really good one. And that's the boundary of his time. That's the boundary of his energy. And that energy piece for me is huge, because I can cultivate the time because I'm really good at time management, but I am allowing my energy.
You don't give halfway.
Yeah, no.
You are at 150% in.
I love you. That's awesome. Thank you. Were you there at the last meeting when Brianna sat down and she was like, "Are you always this cheerful?"
I did not.
And I was like, "Wait, hold on. You have to understand where I came from. This is like unspeakable joy, because I have literally exerted myself to be quote unquote happy. For a decade I did it. And I was miserable. Miserable inside. And now it's harder to be fake in that regard than to just say, you know what, today I'm really tired. And I'm going to do this puzzle for 6 hours, which is what I did on Saturday. And it was so much fun. I rested. Actually rested.
I'm so proud of you.
Are you? I literally was at the kitchen table. My husband was like, I don't think I've ever seen you sit in the same place for that long. I was like, this is just really great for me right now. There's like all these distractions with the kids, and in-laws are there, and people are cooking, and I just sat. It was so beautiful. So thanks for that.
That's another one, rest.
Rest is huge. And so God, for 40 days, right? Jesus, for 40 days was called into the wilderness to just sit and be. I want you to take note of this specifically, and always remember that even in our rest, there will be conflict. And
that was
the
work rest.
enemy is coming at you during that time, because you're doing something counterculture to what everyone else is telling you to do.
Busy, hustle.
Yes, which we've talked about in our first podcast. It's really hard thing. Those are amazing examples. Other examples of it is when his priorities of personal care, which is a part of that time, which is a part of that investment into other people, he really prioritized his inner circle. And this goes back to relationships and not being for everyone, is knowing that the circle of influence that you are providing yourself on a daily basis, that's a huge boundary creator that you can start. Like weaning out the people that aren't inputting into you in a positive, joyful, all the fruits of the spirit, giving, kind way. So I think that's a huge boundary example that he provided to us. He also spoke, like the way that he utilized his words. He was a very good example of listening, obviously, not speaking, and here I am talking. But the way that he called people into their own actions.
Ooh.
And didn't, just because you set a boundary doesn't mean somebody's going to respond to it the way that you want. And so recognizing that your words have authority and creating a boundary that you aren't going to inhibit yourself from saying something that the Lord would have you say.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to people please. And so calling out the action in other people, which is, almost like a counterintuitive concept to a boundary, because usually a boundary is like brought into yourself, where this is like you're being called out in doing the work of the Lord or something difficult. But if you don't say it, you're breaking a boundary.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. And I think the really cool thing about that as well is that sometimes we don't need to say anything.
Yeah.
Like with Jesus at the wedding. He didn't preach at the wedding. He turned water into wine.
Yeah,
and that was him loving on those people and making their
good.
wedding a beautiful and joyous time, you know?
Really
like, I think a lot of times as Christians we feel like, oh my gosh, I did not just tell the person at Chick-fil-A about Jesus and that was horrible. Isn't this opportunity just by being kind to them?
Yeah.
Is being light.
Yes,
you know?
very much so. Yeah, and I surely don't walk around like
Jesus
everywhere. It doesn't
Jesus.
work that way. It doesn't at all. Like this is weird. I have a lot of Chick-fil-A examples. I don't go to Chick-fil-A a lot, but clearly it stood out to me the last time I was there. I got to see and interact with a lot of people because I was there longer than I usually am. I'm in drive-thru.
Yeah.
But the kids were playing. It was just on President's Day, and we were supposed to go to an outing with them, and it was closed until a later hour. And so somebody was there that had gone to my previous retreat, and she comes up to me and she was like, hey, and introduces me to her daughter, introduces me to her grandchildren. We end up having this like beautiful experience in Chick-fil-A where like I had the opportunity because of the time commitment that I had given this woman, and just being present with her versus waiting for my friend and sitting with the kids or being on my phone or any of that. I had this incredible opportunity to take our relationship deeper because I got to learn about her in a way that I otherwise feel like I wouldn't have like been presented to me. So just being really mindful of where you are when you're there, and not allowing, again, those inputs of social media or your phone or the dinging, because there's dinging all the time.
Literally.
In every part, right? So I am loving this conversation. We're about out of time. We've talked about every single thing. I didn't get to say this, which I think is a really great way to close it out, is when establishing boundaries, being very mindful of the motive behind the boundary. Because you could hear this conversation, you could twist and turn it and bend it into whatever it is that you now think that you need to do to be the perfect Christian, or to be a better mom, or to be a better wife. Again, we're literally not doing this as a preaching mechanism at all. It's sharing our heart and sharing what's been pressed into us. But you can create boundaries out of wrong motive. And that could be in your relationship. You could create a boundary with somebody saying, I'm not going to spend time with them, which is something that we talked about, because I'm trying to hurt their feelings.
Right.
And there's a very different boundary with the same exact scenario where I can't spend time with this person, but your motive is because it sucks my joy. Because I become a worse version of myself when I am constantly input with the negativity that they're providing into my life. And so really, you said check in with your emotions, right, earlier, and like understanding what's happening. Understand the why behind your motive, behind your boundary, because if you don't, you are creating a negative example to what Jesus would have you do. And that's like the opposite of this whole conversation.
No words. No words needed.
I love
Mic
that
drop.
about you. I love that about you. I need to be better at that. I end up taking over the mic and it's like never my intention, but there's so much. This was a really good one for me.
The Lord put this on your heart. So
He did, like the very first conversation.
Yeah.
Like, what do you want to talk about? Like boundaries. Boundaries. It's so important, and it's like you get to live in such abundance with such freedom when you can actually unlock the depth to what they intend for your life.
Mm-hmm.
So I even felt like this morning when I was looking at examples biblically, whether it be Jesus, whether it be disciples who are imitating Jesus, other parts of the Bible, I really want to learn that more, I think. So I'm going to call myself to that. Like where more biblical examples come into play.
That's really cool.
I think that would be really helpful for me. And read the book, not listen to it.
There's so many.
I know.
Scripture references.
Ooh, I'm excited. Oh, there is. In that even. Ooh, yay. Okay, I do need to read it then. Maybe I'll couple that as I go through and learn.
It'll help you. And it'll give you you'll start just being like, I didn't even realize that was a boundary.
Cool. I think we actually opened up a lot of can of worms in the sense of like talking about things that I was like, oh, what is the boundary?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really good. Again, not rules. It's meant to provide freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for being here always. I'm glad you were in person. I hope that people enjoyed the in-person experience because there's just something better about staring at your beautiful eyes than doing it on the screen.
I know, but sometimes you freeze.
I know.
I was like, is she? Yep, okay.
Oh, yeah, that's awkward. And always in the most beautiful frame, right? We're like, eh. All right, I didn't cue up Sister, so I might have to Sister.
You're a great singer.
Oh. Get out of here, Tianna. Literally, get out of here. So good.
I'm TamRA Andress. I'm your Fit and Faith host, and I am so excited to just be here to share with you other movers, dreamers, shakers, entrepreneurs, pastors, whatever. If you've got a head and you've got a heart, I'm so excited to explore who that is, whose you are, and discover your wholeness, your health, your wealth, and your joy. I love to exude happiness. I want people to know that this is not... this came with trial, you guys. This came with a lot of effort. This came with a lot of lows and so many highs. And I want us to experience those together. This is a real community of dreamers, and I'm excited to help catapult your calling, your kingdom experience, the purpose of your imprint on the world, wherever, however that is. So come along for the ride. I'm excited to chat with you. Like, comment, review. Send me a DM, send me an email. It's me responding, even though I have an incredible team. And so I'm just excited to get to know you. Let's connect, let's create community, and let's walk in our calling.